Hello and welcome to Utter Punts. Sadly, it's only me and Jim this week. It's one of those things you'll have to put up with a bit too much brumming. Anyway, how's your week been, Jim?
Wow, I'm looking at this as an opportunity. This is unfiltered, unproduced, brummy pants on Utter Punts.
Mate, no globalist agendas here, eh? Right, so let's crack on with a little bit of local agendas. I personally kind of expected the Bills to defeat the Ravens. Probably one of a few people who did. Realistically, I think everyone else was just kind of hoping, but I don't know how to feel about it because I kind of feel that the Ravens were better positioned to beat the other team that got through at the weekend. The Chiefs. What are your thoughts, man?
Let's be honest, the Ravens didn't lose that game. Mark Andrews lost the Ravens that game. A really costly fumble and then just devastating drop on the 2-point conversion at the end of the game. Made me laugh, to be honest with you. I was.
I know you.
Yeah, I was absolutely thrilled with that outcome. Mark Andrews has been a thorn in my side ever since he got drafted by the Ravens, and has generally been probably a top 5 to 10 tight end in the league. And the sweet irony of him costing them the game, which he did. There's no two ways about it. He cost them the game. Genuinely made my weekend that little bit much better. So yeah, I was pretty happy. I bore no mind into Dan's mental state or happiness while I was celebrating that loss.
Well, no, you haven't met Dan, so
I know, but I just didn't like him because he's a Ravens fan. So, no, to be honest, it's nothing.
I'm sure he doesn't like you either, mate,
It's
because you're a Browns fan.
I want a terrible taste in the American football team. So it's
I appreciate their colour scheme. It's decent. Nearly as good as the other.
I like that.
Yeah. But like all in all, I thought Lamar, apart from in the second half, played incredibly well. Allen played well in the first half, went off the boil, but then came back to do enough. I think they both showed themselves to be very capable quarterbacks. The only problem is I do think that I know that there's an awful lot of people that will hate this opinion, but I do think the Chiefs are going to repeat and get the Super Bowl again. I don't think that they get into second gear throughout the actual regular season. And from what I've seen, anyone who's playing the Chiefs is playing well. How many officials are on the field at any one time as well as the Chiefs?
Unbelievable.
So,
but, yeah, I mean, look, the Bills. Look, all jokes aside, I think the Bills have probably been one of the top 2 or 3 teams in football in the regular season, along with the Ravens and the Chiefs. Ironically, the Ravens are just. It's just tough luck that they're in the same sort of division as the Bills in that sense. But I mean, for me, it's just a case of we'll see what happens. But I mean, after what we watched, I mean, we watched it together on Saturday evening with the Chiefs, and you've hit the nail on the head. And it's something that we've spoke about over a number of weeks on Utter Punts, and that is the unbelievable officiating for Chiefs games. I mean, the Bills beat them in the regular season. I don't know if the refs have taken that personally and have then seen the need to redress that balance over the next 8-9 weeks after that game, and will continue all the way to the Super Bowl. But the refereeing decisions in that Chiefs game were unreal, absolutely unreal. And it comes to something when the American commentary team are sitting there.
Kurt Warner was livid.
Yeah, and I think it was Joe Buck as well when he sat there and he said, "Oh, come on," and we were watching it and we both looked at each other and smiled because, usually the commentators try and gloss over a little bit of that. Even they couldn't do that this time.
It was refreshing to hear. Like at last, commentators been, having the freedom to say what they see. I don't know what might have changed, but I'm really glad to see it because, like, you have to call these things out when it's that obvious. The play where two players collided, two Texans collided, and Mahomes was trying to draw them in by sliding incredibly late. That was bad. But when Mahomes took the flop on the sideline, having had a hand on his shoulder, and he took a complete flop to try. At this point, you have to do something to redress the balance. If a runner is a runner, they are a runner. And it should only be called dead after they make themselves safe. And okay, you should try to avoid the head contact, but there wasn't any head contact on Mahomes. So, but they're really good as well. They know how to play things to their advantage. I thought the Texans gave an incredibly spirited performance. But when we're sitting there watching it with, like, obviously Ollie, my brother, and we have Woody with us as well, who doesn't normally watch the NFL, and he's sitting there laughing his head off at the decisions that were going to the Chiefs, because it's not subtle. And I think with that reffing crew, the Chiefs were already 8-0. Ollie mentioned to me it was either 8-0 or 9-0, and they're at least 9-0 now with that reffing crew. So there needs to be something done to make sure that things are going correctly. Now, when you look at it analytically, on the data, it does appear that the Chiefs are just as penalised as anybody else. However, it always happens at a significant point that a strange decision goes their way. And it is either the overprotection of Mahomes, or the NFL really needs to take a look at what's going on when it comes to gambling patterns.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I'm not particularly fond of Patrick Mahomes anyway. Like, it is what it is. Is he a generational quarterback? I think maybe in other seasons he's looked that way. I'm not sure this season he's had the same zip as what he's had in the last few years. I think the defense has carried Kansas City for a large part of the season, and that's evidenced by the fact that they scored 23 points against the Texans at the weekend. The Texans' offense wasn't good. I think that's one to note. So I think
it's worrying how Stroud is missing people that he was previously hitting right in stride, regardless of the fact that he's learning a new sort of an additional level of detail to the offense.
I lost a lot of respect for Mahomes with the flop that on the sideline, and it almost shut. And I think it also didn't help. I don't think it helps the Chiefs' perception overall, because it's almost he got up and he expected that penalty flag.
Well, we know full well how Dan feels about the Chiefs after last year against the Ravens. We know that you could look at that and you could argue it either way. Not any of the things that went on against the Texans. No. So all in all, I do think they're going to win the Super Bowl. I hope at some point they play a game where I feel like they've earned it. But Mahomes, for me, is still playing within himself. There was that he threw a touchdown pass to Travis Kelce while he was being sacked. And I was expecting a replay to show that his shin was down, but it just wasn't. If anything, it was even better than the Burrow pass that was quite similar earlier in the season, where I felt that his knee or shin was potentially touching as he got rid of the ball.
He does some amazing things, and I think that that there is that. I just think those episodes have been less this year, and I think that's probably that the whole offense has contracted with the Chiefs a little bit in terms of. They lost their wide receiver early in the season. Kelsey's getting older and hasn't looked the same offensive weapon. He still gets those yards after the catch, though, so credit to him there. But yeah, I mean, we go to those two Texans players colliding on there, and I mean, the following day, the head of the NFL officiating crew, the whole shebang on the referee side of things, came out and said, yeah, all of those decisions were correct. Which is a horrifying statement to make when you've watched 7 replays of two Texans players colliding with each other above Patrick Mahomes, who slid late, and a 15-yard penalty got given on, which I think was a third down, and extended the drive, and they scored.
So if he thinks all of those penalties should have been given, is he taking into account that on every Chiefs offensive play, their right tackle is basically going early?
No, that I don't.
or lining up out of position
Well,
well past
there was
the belt
four or
line of the centre.
There was 4 or 5 instances of what we thought were false starts. There was a couple of illegal formation penalties that weren't called. There were people in motion that shouldn't have been in motion, and all of this seemed to get ignored. Whereas with the Texans, I think they can feel rightly hard done by in the fact that they got called for everything. One thing we should note about is is it Chris Boyd on
Yeah,
the opening opening kickoff of the game, basically turning around and trying to fight his special teams.
I genuinely don't think that's what's going on. So
No, and they've come out since and said that wasn't the case. It was
So
just
I didn't think it was at the time, simply because Chris Boyd was previously on the Vikings, and like he's one of the most committed downhill like special teamers you'll ever see. He's meant to be a cornerback, but he's a bit too linear. And one of the things that I had noticed with him over his time with the Vikings is he's not always aware of things that go on. I'm saying this as politely as I can. And I genuinely believe he thought he'd made a spectacular play and the coach was coming to celebrate with him. And all because if you look at it, you started making money signs. That's not what you do when you're irate. He thought he was celebrating, and like that was my personal interpretation of it. And then afterwards, they came out and said the same thing. I know a lot of people have looked at it and gone no, but I just think those people
no.
maybe
I
lack
think
passion.
I think you're right. I think, but I mean, the Chief. You don't need any help to lose to the Chiefs. So taking your
Helmet off.
helmet off and throwing it on the first snap of the game and basically giving the Chiefs starting field position at somewhere around the 40 to 45. I know it was actually no, it was the 20. They had it at the Texans 20, didn't they? Because they bust out a 65-yard kickoff return.
So I think you might be able to blame Stephon Diggs for what Chris Boyd did, because in the biggest play that Chris Boyd had ever seen in the playoffs, the Minneapolis Miracle, the man who did it took his helmet off and threw it 15 yards away to bask in glory from the crowd. Now there might be some kind of like embedded memory within him, which is when you make a great play in the playoffs, let the world see the man. I'm stretching it, but I just wanted to give Diggs a shout out because Minneapolis Miracle was still great and upset the Saints. So, overall though, the Texans gave it everything. I didn't think that Stroud played to his potential. I'm hoping that next year, after his sophomore, the traditional sophomore slump rate is what they called it. So hopefully he's back being Stroud next year because he's a really, really great quarterback to watch.
One thing it has done is it's taken Bobby Slovic out of the head coaching conversations because he was being mentioned with many jobs last year.
Former PFF guy, isn't he? I think.
And he hasn't been linked with any in this cycle. No. So I think that, retaining that continuity on the Texans is important. They've still got some good, they've got good draft picks available to them this year. They've run out of the money train of the Deshaun Watson trade now. But they've still got their own picks and plus a few bits and pieces from the Vikings as well. So I think the Texans are going to continue to ascend in what realistically is probably the worst division, the worst sort of conference in football.
Yeah, but they are. Which we could just run through all the games, but I feel like we should go where the conversation flows with this one, mate. And that division itself, a bit of a car crash. We've got the Titans right up at the top of the draft order, picking number 1 overall, and saying that they won't turn down a generational player at number 1 overall. Which makes me think...
one of those.
Is that Hunter?
Yes.
Is he generational because he can play both sides of the ball? Or is he generational? I
think that's why he's being considered generational. The ironic thing is, I don't think he's, as a pure cover corner, I don't think he's the best corner in the draft. And as a wide receiver, he's possibly top 5. So I think when you combine those two, and if you've got a dearth of talent in both of those positions, then you're going to pick what would be a generational talent, the same as like Bo Jackson and stuff back in the day. We haven't seen a two-way player in the NFL for a long, long time. It remains to be seen if Travis Hunter actually is a two-way player in the NFL. Most teams would prefer to probably pigeonhole him into being a cornerback, would be my thought, as first and foremost. It does give you the option, gives you the gadget players on offense as well. But ultimately, yeah, I mean, to be honest, it was good news for my Browns as well when the Titans came out and said that, because it puts the two top quarterbacks back on the table, whereas we thought originally that they were going to go QB and the Browns would potentially be left with what's left, or it makes the pick slightly less desirable from a trade perspective. But ultimately, yeah, I mean the Titans don't have a lot of talent. They've squandered quite a few draft picks. They've got a few. They've got a few pieces. I wouldn't. They're not key pieces. You know, they don't have top flight cornerbacks. They don't have a particularly strong left tackle. They haven't got a quarterback. They've got a 30-year-old wide receiver that they stole from the Jags on 29 million a season from last year in Calvin Ridley. So I think the Titans, even if they take a generational player as he's being called, are still going to be still somewhat talent deficient, and I'd expect them to be picking in the top 10 to 12 of 2026 as well, to be honest.
That's interesting. So, okay, so who do the Titans currently have at QB? It's
Levis and Mason
Will
Rudolph.
Will Levis, Mason Rudolph. Now, do we think they're going to stick with that? Because
I think
I'm not
Rudolph's
sure
out of
about that.
contract at the end of the season.
Yeah. So they're going to bring in someone to compete with Will Levis. Is this a potential landing spot for Aaron Rodgers?
I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to leave the Jets personally. I'd say it's a potential landing spot for Kirk Cousins. It's a potential landing spot for Justin Fields. It's a potential landing spot for Sam Darnold. All of those are quite possible. I mean, I think if the Titans sign Sam Darnold, he's going to get Brian Callahan fired. To be perfectly honest with you, I think Kirk Cousins could well do the same, which would be music to your ears. Um,
Well, not music to my ears. I don't want people getting fired for Kirk. Kirk could be a decent enough backup, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, and then you've got Justin Fields and Russell Wilson as well is going to hit the market. So it depends. I don't think the Titans will be afraid to spend what it takes to get a quarterback, and obviously that'll all become much clearer in the second half of second week of March when we start seeing the free agency dominoes fall. But it's also going to tip the Titans' hand, because if they get, but we thought that with the Falcons last year.
Yeah.
But if they sign a quarterback to 40 million, close to 40 million or 40 million plus a season, then you wouldn't expect them to go number one with a quarterback. I think it's fairly safe to say, but it does put the pick on the market and for sale for that perspective. So if the Giants, who've been heavily linked with Shador Sanders, really want Sanders, they could trade with up to the Titans number one, and the Titans still walk away with Travis Hunter at number three if the Browns go quarterback. So I think there's over the next 2 months, there's a lot of moving parts to watch, specifically in this division with the Titans and how it all fits in together. And it really provides quite a really interesting narrative and storyline for the draft that comes up at the end of April.
I do feel that there is another QB who should be in the conversation for the draft. And I think because, for me, none of the current candidates are without their potential red flags. They're all a gamble, right? They always are. I'm pretty sure that a few of them will stick in the league and be good. But I really liked what I saw from Ohio State quarterback Will Howard, who is actually eligible for this draft. He was making every throw, and not only that, showed a great deal of leadership down the stretch against Notre Dame. Nerves of steel, mate. Which for me, and the defence was coming for him as well. For me, that is the most promising sign of a player. I've always had reservations about college quarterbacks who struggle under pressure up the middle of the pocket. One of the main reasons why I really didn't feel that Caleb was going to be pro ready this season, and he just seems to be able to deal it. But he hasn't got the same natural arm strength that I've seen
That's
from the
what I was
likes
going to
of.
say. I think the concerns with him are more athletic concerns than his arm strength.
He'll be interesting to keep an eye on in the combine. Then that's the kind of player who can really come on leaps and bounds. If he suddenly displays an ability to do a
Yeah, I
60 yard.
can't remember where he transferred in from to Ohio. I think it might have been no. I thought Carl McCord went from Ohio State to Syria. I can't think who he came from, but he was a transfer quarterback to start for Ohio State this year. And I think look, I mean, I think there's a group of quarterbacks that we're going to see sort of late second to early fourth round, maybe 3 or 4 quarterbacks in that bracket. Quinn Ewers is another one.
I can't believe Queen's decided to come out
Who
and turn down
athletically is a much better prospect than Will Howard, but when you actually put on the film and watch the two quarterbacks side by side, one looks calm and collected, and the other one looks flustered and panicked consistently.
I saw an awful lot of Kirk in Quinn Ewers. I understand that he didn't decide to take whatever nil offer he's been offered. There's rumours of it being $8 million. I don't know how true that is. But he clearly has decided the time is to get into the NFL. Now, it might be interesting to see if he's taking the approach, I don't particularly care about where I'm drafted. I want to get into the NFL and just start and get a good landing spot with a good set of coaches and maybe just start learning NFL offenses and processes.
He'd be one of those where he'd want to go to a team that's got a veteran that's under a little bit of pressure. Who is in danger of potentially getting benched in the next year or two. I think he'd probably be a fit for like someone like the Seahawks or something, because while they've got Geno Smith and Geno's performed at a relatively high level, he never gives
another gear.
He never really gives that overwhelming sense of confidence that he's a top 10 quarterback, and he's got the ability, and has he got the ability to win games for a team. So yeah, I think I think there's someone like the Seahawks. The Dolphins would be another good fit with Tua's injury history, and it will give him an opportunity to potentially start. There's 3 or 4 teams out there that he could get in there, and then looking if he could. He's one of those players that he could absolutely take off. No one was expecting Dak Prescott to unseat Tony Romo when he did in Dallas. And I'm not saying he's going to unseat Tua, but if Tua ends up with another concussion and misses half a season or something like that, and the Dolphins have got weapons. They've got.
But the weapons want to leave. At least one does. The Tyreek Hill's behaviour, if anything, might have lessened people's willingness to pick up his $30 million cap hit next year.
He wants to leave because he wants a new contract on more money.
Which is nuts, because you don't get that after you're showing a massive decline in your production, regardless of.
You're nearly 30. Justin Jefferson's on $35 million a season, but the guy's 24.
Having said that, he is a really smart guy, Tyreek Hill. Like, very, very articulate. I remember hearing him on some podcast before we came out of the draft, and I was astounded at how smart the guy is.
Also has a very checkered personal history, though.
He does, but elements of it, if I remember rightly, were cleared up. Although, it's hard. Yeah, it's hard
allegedly.
It's just hard to know what goes on in these things, right? But I think he's a smart guy. He might be looking at it as, I'm nearly 30 or I'm 30. This will be my last payday, and if he's looking to maximise that, I can't say I blame him. But you'd have thought he'd want more Super Bowls. So
let's put it this way. I mean, there'd be 3 good teams for him to go to. The Bills would be one. The Dolphins won't trade within the division, probably. The Chiefs would be another one.
Yeah,
to go back there, is Andy Reid willing to put up with that again? And would they? The favoured team for me would be the Ravens, and I think Tyreek Hill and Lamar Jackson and Bateman and
Flowers.
Those together, I think that's what could put the Baltimore offense over the top. As long as they can get a tight end that can catch. So that would be.
Well, they already have one in Isaiah Likely.
They've got one, but just not the one that counted on Saturday. On Saturday.
Only in playoffs on 2-point conversions or must have it touchdowns in games against Steelers years ago. It was weird how those plays look so similar.
Can't run with the ball in his hands either. Gets stripped on that, but there we go. Good times.
Stop enjoying it so much. Right, let's hear from our sponsors, and we'll be back to talk about, I think, the Lions. Why not?
Here at Utter Punts, we love watching the NFL with friends, and in our opinion, there's no better place to grab a bite to eat and watch the NFL than Beer Keller in Manchester. The burgers are massive, there's loads of HD screens, the wings are great, and there's a superb choice of drinks behind the bar too. Most importantly for us though, the people are brilliant, like-minded NFL fans who want to enjoy the game and have a laugh. It's definitely one of the best venues to watch your favourite team in.
So, Now that we've let you indulge in a little bit of your Ravens hate, which quite frankly I'd rather Dan was here to stand up against and give us a
One
blow
day.
for sledging. Yeah,
One day.
I look forward to it. You'll probably find like one of those sniper dots appear on your forehead from nowhere, mate. But anyway, let me indulge a little bit in the Lions. Dan, don't cry, man. Don't cry. You were meant to bite people on the knees when you got down. Don't cry, man. Anyway, the Lions lost. They lost to, well, one of the best rookie performances in the playoffs from a quarterback I've ever seen. They got outscored. The defense, which had been able to stand up to the fact they had lost 17 players this season who play on that side of the ball, finally got exposed by a mobile quarterback with a big arm, as was called by Ollie, by the way. I'll have to give credit where it's due. But I just thought it was... To me, it was unexpected. I didn't expect Goff to sort of struggle. Again, Ollie cited the fact that he's always struggled against Dan Quinn defenses.
That was me.
Was that you? Right, okay. So, like, you do have that whole sort of, like, element going there. But I think we all expected the Lions to basically push from the side. They've been fantastic all season, but they just couldn't keep them out. There's a wide receiver who was taken in the same draft class as Amon-Ra St. Brown. I feel like bringing this up because I thought it was kind of cool. There's a guy called Brown who I can't remember his first name, which is very rude of me. But like, if you could look that up, wide receiver for Washington called Brown. He was taken in the same draft class as Amon-Ra St. Brown, who cited him as one of the 15 wide receivers who should never have been taken ahead of him. And the guy balled out over the weekend.
The Army Brown.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was really pleased for him because I love that kind of thing. It was like when Jack Grealish used to mock Almiron, and then Almiron played great against Villa. Again, something I would have enjoyed, but you probably didn't. But anyway, all in all, I think we've got a situation where the Lions gave it everything. They've come up short. They still have a fantastic squad, but they have now lost both of their coordinators. Aaron Glenn is now the head coach of the Jets, and it'd be interesting. I was going to mention this earlier when you brought up Rodgers probably staying. Maybe he will. Maybe it is a smart move for a defensive-minded head coach just to try to hand everything over to a veteran quarterback in the first year, and let him wrap everyone he wants around him. But that seemed to be what they tried last year. Statistically, Aaron Rodgers did not have a bad season. Look it up. His bad years or other QB's good years. So it is kind of interesting to see what's going to happen both of the Jets, but and of course the Chicago Bears, who picked up Ben Johnson, revealing the fact that he's actually a ginger guy because I'd never seen him without his cap before. Had no idea. Welcome to the... I don't know. I don't like you, so no. But all in all, there's massive changes in the NFC North, and the Lions. What do you think their window's closing? Do you think people have decided that Goff can't cope under pressure, or do you think that Dan Campbell will simply summon out of nowhere some other genius lieutenants to help him to put together another winning coaching staff?
Well, I think the Lions will probably promote internally for their coordinator positions. I think they'll be looking for continuity on both sides of the ball. The defense has played really well in the face of adversity this year. The offense, Jared Goff continues to surprise people, but in a similar vein to Sam Darnold, he just came unstuck against the Commanders at the weekend. Very similar to what Darnold did against the Lions, and this isn't a pop. It's just
it's just a fact, right?
This is the Sam Darnold. This is the Jared Goff that I think most people sort of expected to see for the Lions. And to be fair to Goff, he's absolutely balled out for the last two seasons. So. I don't think the window's closing. I think they've got plenty of young players that under contract for a good period of time. Yes, Jared Goff's going to need a new deal at the end of. I think he needs one now or next season. But with the way the salary cap is, I don't think that'll hamstring the franchise. They've got a good head coach in Campbell, and I think you mocked him a little bit at the start of this piece, saying don't cry. I actually thought it was good to see a bit of emotion, to be honest. And you too many times when you're watching a press conference after a team's lost or been eliminated from a playoff game, you get the generic answers. And Kevin Stefanski at the Browns is a master of giving you absolutely nothing in a press conference. Whereas Dan Campbell,
It won't help him. It
What
won't. So like, all you do is you just like it's not going to help him. Like, I know why coaches don't give you anything. It's because they don't want to give their opponents anything either. Like, what he's just done is exposed a massive passion and a massive pride, and I do massively respect the guy. But at the same time, he also betrayed an inability to control his emotions when under pressure, which it's a football game. No one passed away, right? It's
not
not.
agree.
And like there's bigger things in life, and you have to be able to stick up to compartmentalise that and be able to show that no matter what, this pressure will not get to me. That's what you want to see in a leader. Like, and I just think it is something which hasn't helped him. I respect the fact that you like to see the honesty, but I just think that for me, what I want to see from head coaches and GMs is them doing all the things that make their lives easier to do their fundamental jobs, i.e. lead and build a great roster. Like Quasi, for example, when he came out in the media and started talking about the fact that Kirk wasn't a Patrick Mahomes. Everyone knows that, but you don't say it, right?
Nice.
And like for me, this is what Dan's reaction was. I wasn't mocking him. I'm done. Trying to big him up because he shouldn't cry over a football game, much as he cares that much. You've got to be able to. There might have been something underlying, I don't know, and if so, I would apologise. But like for me, if it was all about the fact that their hopes and dreams had been dashed and he was going to see his team broken up, well, that's life, mate. Other people deal with far worse than that.
I think Liam summed it up quite well. Was it last week when he said, how good would it be for the Lions to, Detroit and stuff? And I think Dan Campbell really felt the weight of that expectation. And I think when you put together a season like the Lions have just had, and the upward trajectory they've been on since Dan Campbell got there, it's put a lot of pressure on there. So almost when that pressure releases, that flood of emotion comes. And I think, like I say, it's good. I like to see the human element sometimes in coaches. But yeah, I get exactly what you're saying in terms of, just execute. And I think the Lions have done a really good job of executing through the most of the season. And where they've come unstuck is where Dan Campbell's potentially coached with a little bit too much with emotion. And ultimately, but let's not make any mistake on this. The main issue with the Lions against the Commanders was their turnovers. They both went punch for punch throughout the entire game. But Jared Goff threw in 3 interceptions.
Do you think that the fact that Jared Goff wasn't even responsible for one of the interceptions thrown was maybe a sign of hubris on the part of the now Bears head coach, Bear Johnson? Or was he just unlucky, like trying to display another unbelievable play that would have opened up far more options for their offense moving forward in that game? Like, because honestly, for me, like leaving a guy who I know isn't the most football smart. He's physically brilliant, and like but it took him a long time to learn some decent routes. Do you think it was a smart move? I mean, like, it's 2020 hindsight. I fully get that, but I don't know why they built that play around him. You'd have thought Armour and Brown would have been a far more sensible option if you're going to leave someone in the decision-making capacity.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I think ultimately the blame for this rests on Jared Goff. We can dissect one play here or one play there, and in that situation, yeah, there was a better option on that particular play. But ultimately, when we look at the other two, they were horrible interceptions to throw. So I think ultimately, and Jared Goff just looked flustered. And I mean, yeah, look, he still put up 31 points on a good Commanders defense that he's historically struggled against. Like we said with Dan Quinn's defenses, and a lot of the time, 31 points is enough to win you a game. But when you're committing 3 turnovers. Giving up 45 points, then there's question marks to be had all over the shop, and I think it's ironic that we watched the Lions. I don't want to say they imploded because I don't think they did, but probably their poorest offensive and defensive sort of showings of the season, and then both of their subsequent coordinators go and get hired within a week of that happening. I thought it was quite. I thought it was quite
after for one of them.
I thought it was quite interesting, but also if I was a Bears fan, I'd start to I wouldn't be feeling as smug as I would have felt maybe a week, 3 or 4 days prior to that game. And if I was a Jets fan, I'd be looking at it and going, right, so we fired Robert Saleh after 4 or 5 games. And now we've brought in Robert Saleh to replace Robert Saleh. So I don't really understand. I don't understand necessarily the logic, and I think if these hires were made the week before, which wouldn't have been allowed, obviously due to the negotiating rules, but if that was the situation, then you could have felt a bit better about it. But when you've just had 45 points put on you in the playoffs and watched your quarterback throw 3 interceptions that cost you the game, neither of those head coaching hires would fill me with a massive amount of optimism for the upcoming season.
I do think that Aaron Glenn, for me, is the one where know full well how many injured players they've dealt with. The fact that he was able to scheme up something which worked for them to the point that it did.
Yep.
Like, I'm confident that they're going to be good on. And the Jets, we know, have got talent on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, they fell off a cliff when they fired Salah last year. So I think actually bringing in a defensive coach to manage that piece for the Jets was actually a pretty good decision. And it should get them back to being a top 5-6 unit.
Competitive, but I'm very intrigued to see what they do in terms of how they're going to run their offense. Whether or not it's going to be Aaron Rodgers, who, like, for me, because I like Aaron Rodgers, probably one of the few people left on the planet who does. But most people listen, right? But all in all, I'd like to see him give him one more go, a year removed from the Achilles injury. I honestly believe that Kirk Cousins might be better this year than he was last year because he just had an Achilles injury. So for me, I think that I'm intrigued to see what the Lions do to replace those guys. If they do promote internally, that's great. They've set up a really good succession plan there. I did see Ben Johnson say that the runway had already been built and that their offense should be good for the next 3 to 5 years. Which, might just be buttering up a new rival, or he could honestly just be trying to make Lions fans feel better about the fact that he left them a day after one of their biggest heartbreak.
No, Ben Johnson's put together 2 great seasons as an offensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. Before that, he's had 4 jobs in 5 years. So, has he found his niche? Is he a flash in the pan? Personally speaking, I hope he's a flash in the pan and he flames out spectacularly in Chicago. Nothing against Ben Johnson. Don't like Caleb Williams. Be funny if Caleb Williams costs a head coach a second head coach their job.
Oh, I think he will.
There's plenty to talk about on a punt going forward.
Until the guy who's actually running Chicago, who isn't really Ryan Poles, from what I understand, it's his boss. Until he's gone, then they are fully wedded to Caleb because he was his choice. So we'll see, right? But yeah, for our QBs that kill coaches, Caleb has got an unbelievable amount of natural talent, but he has never done well under pressure at QB, regardless of what level he's been playing at. So
I think just before we go to our last break for it, I think we can just mention that the Rams played on Sunday, but they played at an ungodly hour, so no one really watched it. The Eagles won. I don't really know what happened because I didn't see the game because it's on at like 1 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. So, but yeah, the Eagles won.
That wasn't the time out, right?
I don't have the commitment that you do, mate. And so, yeah.
I might have accidentally watched it, but I thought it was on earlier than that. Rams, Eagles.
Was it an 11 o'clock, Jobby?
Let's have a look. I'm pretty sure it was because the game that I didn't watch.
If that was the early game, that's going to make me look really bad now and just show me up. But I did. So.
Yeah, because it was Bills Ravens later on, wasn't it? Because I didn't see that one. Yeah. So you just didn't bother watching.
No,
but
I watched some of the Bills Ravens game. I thought that game was on after it, but obviously not. But we don't need to talk about it. It is what it is.
Well, well done to the Eagles. Well done to Saquon. I was a bit gutted for the Rams. I honestly have them in my ESPN bracket. I have them getting through to the Super Bowl and losing to the Chiefs. But I'm still,
Stop saying it. You're trying to manifest it.
I might have an idea that I'd like JJ McCarthy to be the man to defeat Mahomes in a duel after he's won 3. Super Bowls in a row. That might be what's going on in my head.
One-legged JJ.
We'll see, mate. If he's only got one leg, he's still going to be better than Deshaun Watson.
In my mind, that is true. No doubt in my mind, that is true.
I don't care if he ends up coming out with a peg leg, mate. He'll still be able to throw the ball accurately. Anyway, that's beside the point. Right, let's take a break.
If you're anything like us at Utter Punts, we love the fantasy games surrounding the NFL, but sometimes they're a bit too focused on their American audiences. That's why we were blown away when the Fantasy Game Day app rolled into town, a weekly fantasy game with player values in pounds totally dedicated to the NFL's UK audience. There's insights and analysis and plenty of opportunity to compete with your friends, but the best bit, weekly cash prizes. Use code PUNTS when you sign up for a free entry after you play your first week.
Right, and we're back. So we've been chatting through the halves of the NFL and, Chiefs, hate you. Eagles, hate you. Washington, don't hate you. How did
Just
that
don't really
happen?
like you.
Well, and I've got a feeling that's only because of previous owners of the Commanders and the fact that they gave us Kirk Cousins. But as it is, now that you haven't got Kirk Cousins, quite like you. And then we've got the Bills, who Vikings of the AFC. I'd like you to beat the Chiefs, but you won't. But at least you've all got playoff football. So let's.
And Josh Allen's missus is hot. So.
Is she? Good. Well done, Josh. Yeah, well done. Yeah. Because there was something about her.
Hayley Steinfeld, I think so now.
Great. I hope she's also a lovely human being. Right, so I reckon we swing it back round to some of the more. Well, I'd like to talk about the Jags because they've probably cost me the stock market game on their own. Them and the Jets, who have finally done the right thing and jettisoned Bolker. Kurt Bolker has gone.
How that guy has stolen a living from Shad Khan for the last couple of years.
He must be very convincing to talk to.
Oh, well, wasn't he used to be the 49ers general manager, and he's the one that got rid of Jim Harbaugh at the 49ers.
Yeah.
And then put them through a period of purgatory.
Yeah.
And then has moved on to the Jaguars and only watched that franchise get worse under his watch.
Yeah.
So, quite stunning that guy's managed to keep his job as long as he has done, to be honest. It was a similar one with the Ravens. Tom Telesco not the Raiders. Tom Telesco, when he got fired from the Chargers and they brought him in as their general manager, and he's now been fired as well. I'm thinking these failed GMs and a retread. Maybe have a think and see what they've actually done. And how they've destroyed the places that they used to be in before you take a second punt on it. So no pun intended. But I think it's just a case. Look, Balky's miracle that guy still had a job, and it allows the Jaguars to move on fresh. The only issue is it's probably come 3 weeks too late. They've
lost Liam Cohen, who apparently was due to sign as the head coach and then decided to go back to the Buccaneers with a healthy pay rise. I understand now that Bulk has been jettisoned. They're pondering making another run at him. So maybe he hasn't signed his new deal just yet. But he himself...
Or his price tag's just gone up massively, one or the other.
Yeah,
I mean, look, you can pay an offensive coordinator as much as you want, but if you're offering him a head coaching job, he's going to take it. So even if you have just signed him for a new contract, it doesn't make any difference. It's just going to cost the billionaire an extra 20 million. So I'm not, but having said that, what are you doing?
I don't know. We've said it from the start. If you can't give a GM a chance to appoint a coach and then fire the coach and carry on looking for a replacement, it makes no sense to do that, because essentially there are different points in their footballing journey within the team, if you like, let's say it in a woke way that people will understand. Journey, together. Go through it together, right? So, with that,
I hate you right now.
Yeah, I'm sorry, man. But the whole point of it all is you set a timeline with your staff, and you want the GM and the head coach to be appointed at the same time and to have the same ideas in mind as to how to build a team and how to generate a culture, right? That's because then everyone's aligned and they're going in the same direction. You can't have a situation where you're bringing in a GM and then letting them fire someone and then rehire somebody because the GM is now under the gun. And if that GM gets fired at the end of the season, well, now you're stuck with someone else who's higher. The new GM's not going to work. It makes no sense. But Shad Khan refused to get rid of Bulker until such a time as it became obvious that the actual attempt to appoint a new head coach was being impacted by his presence. And I think you've got to be more aware than that. You need to understand like where people stand in the NFL community, external to your own private thoughts about the fact, I think he's a really good guy, he's a friend of mine, he does a great ruthless job or whatever. Have a look at how other people perceive them, because that's where the value is, right? Outside perception in many ways, because if someone thinks that someone is going to do a great job and they're going to negotiate in good faith, they're much more likely to want to be with you than they are not be there. But if they've seen someone throw multiple people under the bus in order to preserve their own position, who'd want to go there? So yeah,
look, I know this is ultimately it, right? So Balky was effectively hindering the head coaching search. We've heard that on multiple news outlets now, and that's why Shad Khan got rid of him. I think the issue that you've got is here, all of the teams that are in and around you, like the Patriots, the Titans, people like that, and apart from the Raiders, which surprises nobody, it's just they've had a 3-week head start on this now, and I've said for a couple of times over the last few weeks, this is not a particularly rich talent pool of potential head coaching candidates. That's why most of the names that you see in now are retreads of previous, who've had previous head coaching jobs. Like, is Vrabel really that much of an exciting head coach choice for the Patriots? Probably not. The Titans were never great under him. Yes, they got to the playoffs in a bad division, but whatever.
But the Titans were never well run either. And that for me is the point. You need a GM and a coach working in tandem. Now, who is the Patriots GM at the moment?
They don't actually have one, but it's Elliot Wolf, who's the vice president.
And he was formerly with the Packers, right?
Packers and the Browns.
Okay. So they've got a guy who knows football there. So you'd have thought they might be able to do something to bring in the right guy to marry up with that. I don't know.
It's just talent. That pool's talent deficient. I mean, the favourite for the Jaguars head coaching job is Robert Saleh. And I actually think Robert Saleh did a reasonably good job with what he had with the Jets. The defense was consistently good. Has he topped out at a defensive coordinator? Would I feel more comfortable having Saleh as my defensive coordinator than my head coach? Yes, without a doubt. I think Saleh showed some unfortunate tendencies to throw people under the bus a little bit at the Jets.
I thought he showed the opposite. I didn't feel he held them accountable enough. Like when he was trying to get Rodgers to stop using his cadence, which has been a massive weapon of Rodgers because the O-line couldn't learn when they were meant to jump or not. I felt like he was almost desperately trying to preserve the defensive side of the ball, but not having a clue what was happening on the offensive side of the ball.
Well, this is it, and I think if Saleh gets the Jaguars job, then he needs to bring in a really strong offensive coordinator, as we've seen. He hasn't had that with the Jets in his entire tenure.
I think we can agree Hackett shouldn't be the man, right?
I think we can both agree on that, yeah, with a smile on our face, to be honest. But yeah, I think if he does get that Jaguars job, like I was saying to our good friend Pat yesterday, to try and console him a little bit on the dreadful Jaguars. But actually, I don't think they're a massive turnaround.
They have some talent on their team.
Yeah, they do.
Brian Thomas Jr., is it?
Superstar wide receiver.
And then even though we've spoken about the fact it was a bad move on their part just because of the draft logic at the time. Is it Tevon Walker, the guy they took at number 1 overall? And
they got Josh Allen as well.
Double-digit sacks. Josh Hines Allen, right? He lost the name war. For me, it's not a roster which is devoid of talent at all, but they do need to get their tackle position sorted out. get them solidified. I think they moved on from Cam Robinson, and I don't blame him for that. From what I saw from him over the last couple of games for the Vikings, and I think it's a guy called Walter Little is going to be their left tackle. Or
Walker Little, I think. Yeah.
Is it Walker Little? Sorry, mere names. But he actually was a good prospect coming out of the draft. So like, they might have something there with him. It'll be interesting to see how he holds up. I thought they got a little bit better towards the back end of the season in certain games, and then just showed a complete lack of effort in others. So it'd be interesting to see who a new head coach assesses as being worth keeping around, and whether or not maybe they go into rebuild mode. Because for me, I probably would right now if they haven't got a quarterback other than Rodgers. If they move on from Rodgers, they're going to take a cap hit for that.
Are we talking Jets or Jags?
Sorry, I switched between the two because I was. We're talking Salah, aren't we? So, like, yeah, the whole sort of like situation with the Jets is one where you can see it massively improve. Same as with the Jags, but it's almost, I don't know, it feels like it's kind of just, it's a retread. It feels like a retread.
But the Jets have been a retread for 20 years, and I think that's the key point on this one. They've got Garrett Wilson, who's a very good young wide receiver who wants out if Rodgers is staying. Do you back Rodgers? Do you back your 24-year-old wide receiver that needs a payday? It's a difficult one, and I think I think ultimately what should happen is, you're right, they should probably look to rebuild and move on. What's likely to happen based on the history of the Jets franchise is that they will trade away Garrett Wilson and ultimately run it back with a similar offense that they've got now, and quite possibly be in the same position that we're in.
I don't think they're in a position to pay a wide receiver. I think it would be a silly move for them to do so. So I can understand why they would trade away Garrett Wilson. I can also see him being massively in demand. There aren't that many wide receivers in the upcoming draft that you would consider to be anywhere near his echelon of player.
No.
So I think that could maximise a bit of value there, maybe a first and a second out of him.
I don't know, he's only got 1 year left on his contract.
That does reduce the value.
And I think ultimately it's a difficult one. I just think... I think Garrett Wilson will be gone, unfortunately. I don't agree. I think they could pay a wide receiver, but they chose to bring in Devontae Adams and his $30 million contract to play nice with Aaron Rodgers. Didn't go too well for them last season.
What's his dead cap hit?
I have no idea. But
you see, they might be wedded to keeping pretty much the same offense around just because moving off it doesn't make sense. So you can understand even more why Wilson wouldn't be able to be afforded.
Well, it's interesting that the Jags and the Jets are both in very similar positions in that sense.
But I see hope with the Jags. That's the problem. I think the Jags can be competitive again in their division quickly. For me, I almost feel like the Jets do need to hit the hard reset, but I don't think they're in a position to do so. So I can see them needing another new head coach 2 to 3 years down the line from no fault of Aaron Glenn's.
I agree. I think Aaron Glenn will probably restore the Jets defense to where Salah had it. I think Salah will be a massive improvement for the Jaguars defense, and that will bring that up significantly. But both of their futures and success will be completely governed by who they get in to run their offense. The Jaguars haven't found someone to mesh properly with Trevor Lawrence since really they've had Trevor Lawrence, and Aaron Rodgers, as we know, is a little bit of an enigma, and likes to have his pals on the staff, and that's why Nathaniel Hackett's consistently retained a job over the last few years. So I think it's going to be an interesting one to watch. The Jaguars, like I said, I was being nice yesterday saying, I think if I can get a couple of corners, a wide receiver, and a little bit of help in the trenches over free agency and the draft, then I actually think the Jaguars have got the potential to turn it around. In my opinion, they've already got more talent than the Titans and the Colts in that sense. So I think they've already got a head start on that. With the Jets, they're in a difficult position that they've got their aging offense. They've got a defense that has performed at a high level but didn't really like Salah being fired and fell off a cliff. I think Aaron Glenn will get them back get them back playing.
He seems like the kind of guy
he looks like a guy you want to play for. But they're both going to live and die on their offensive staff. And like we've said, and I'll reiterate the point till I'm blue in the face. The overall coaching, cycle and the talent pool is shallow in the NFL this offseason.
Do you know what? You said something earlier before we started that I think it was worth raising at this point. I think any one of either of those two teams would have massively benefited from Josh McDaniels as their OC, but he's now gone back to meet up with the Patriots, right? So Mike Vrabel slid someone into that role. He'll be looking for a new DC. I don't know if Jared Mayo didn't have too much pride about it. I think you were right when you said he'd make a good DC for them.
Antonio Pierce wouldn't surprise me at the Patriots.
That could be a shame. That could be a shame.
And I think this is what we could well see is we start seeing people that are just going to swap between sort of these lower franchises where they've had their expertise. Could Jared Mayo be the defensive coordinator for the Raiders now that Tom Brady's heading up that coaching search and has got those Patriots ties? That's a possibility as well. So I think what we're going to see is again, this coaching cycle has been really slow. Normally what happens is everyone gets fired the day after the final game of the season, and then within a week you start seeing 3 or 4 people picking up their new head coaches. But people are either waiting for these coaches that are going deep into the playoffs, or they genuinely don't know what they're doing. And I think that's no more evident than it is in Dallas right now, as they're going to hire what can only be described as a journeyman offensive coordinator who's coordinated the Rams, the Seahawks. He's been in college. He's done everything as an offensive coordinator, and I don't think he's ever particularly excelled in any one place for more than a year. But it looks like Brian Schottenheimer's going to be the new head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Bearing in mind that's America's team, the biggest team in the NFL. That's a huge letdown for Dallas fans, I think, and we can all laugh at Dallas once again. So I'm fairly happy with it, to be honest, because it is what it is. But we're talking about retreads. Dennis Allen looks like he's going to be the new Bears defensive coordinator, and this is what I mean. We're just going to go
solid DC, right? But
not head coach material. Failed twice. What jobs have we still got open now? So we've got the Raiders, the Saints.
Jags are still open.
Jags.
No, there's not. I don't think there's anyone else open with a head coaching job. It's just mainly like staff fits around them.
Coordinate. There just seems to be a dearth of coordinators. Yeah,
true coordinator. And remember what happened to the Eagles? Not this year, but the year before when they made it to the Super Bowl. They lost both their coordinators, and they ended up bringing in guys who I think Sean Desai and the wrong Ben Johnson, if I remember rightly. And it was just one of those where it's like, well, that's definitely a downgrade. Now their coaching staff has been completely refreshed this year with 2 new coordinators, including Fangio, who's obviously got their defence singing for his song right now. Look at them, they're powerhousing their way through to another championship game right now. I do hope that they lose, but bearing in mind that the last time the teams met was Jalen Hurts was on the field, it was a one-sided beatdown. As soon as he left the field, then Jayden Daniels took over the game. Brilliant. Let's see what happens now. Like, now that Jayden Daniels has got the confidence he can dice up that defence, and now the Eagles have got Jalen Hurts, should be a good game, that one.
I'm looking forward to all the games this weekend. Both the games this weekend, to be fair. I think the Eagles and the Commanders will be a good game. It's got a potential to be a bloodbath if the Eagles shut down Jayden Daniels early and tee off on him in the backfield. But at the same time, it's had that Jayden Daniels. There's been a potential for that to happen in probably every Jayden Daniels game this season.
I respect how calm he is. Yeah,
absolutely. And then obviously you go to the Bills and Chiefs, and no one's really interested in watching the players for the Bills and Chiefs. They're just going to be watching the officials because
it's one of those, isn't it? It's almost like you better show Taylor Swift a lot. Maybe it'll distract people from the fact that they're going to be looking at everything the officials are doing.
Just the blank space, baby.
No, it's so you shouldn't get to the point where there's more interest in what the officials are going to do than the teams. So, yeah, that's a bit of a problem. Anything else you want to cover off before we call it a day? Say bye to everyone?
I don't think so. Just ha-ha Ravens, ha-ha Cowboys. And, yeah, just keep... There's like confidence and comfort in misery. So with my brands being so bad, actually just revelling in other people's lack of joy. and general, just like I say, misery is all I've got to cling to. So I'm going to continue to cling to it, and we'll have 2 more teams' fan bases to mark on next week, sort of punts.
Yeah, that's very true. Very, very true. So yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of really is we could have mentioned the Saints. We don't really want to get into the Saints because, quite frankly, you're a dead franchise because of the way that you mishandled your cap over the years. We'll speak about you when you're possibly relevant again, which don't know when that'll be. Bye from me.
Bye from me.